Hi, I'm Yaakov Katz, and welcome to a new episode of the Jewish People's Podcast by JPPI. On this podcast, regular listeners know we often talk about the Israel-diaspora relationship. We look at it mostly from the perspective, though, of what the situation is in the diaspora, what can the diaspora do for the state of Israel, and we also do touch upon sometimes what is Israel's role as the Jewish state, the Jewish homeland, when it comes to helping the Jewish communities that are located throughout the world. That's the focus of today's episode. We look at what do Israelis think about their responsibility is when it comes to Jewish communities around the world. How has it changed in the aftermath of October 7th? Has it increased? Has it decreased? And how connected do Israelis feel to Jews that they meet, wherever they might be, in London, in Chicago, in LA, or Paris, or Sydney, Australia? Our guest today is Shlomit Mali, CEO of AMI, which is the National Alliance Strengthening Israel's Connection to World Jewry. It's a project that is jointly funded by philanthropists as well as the Israeli government. And recently, AMI was folded in to us here at JPPI, the Jewish People Policy Institute. AMI runs a number of programs that are aimed at increasing the understanding among Israelis of their connection, their responsibility to Jews throughout the diaspora. One interesting project that they recently launched is sending delegations of IDF officers, majors, officers who have just signed on. They're basically continuing their career. They're going to become career officers, and taking them to a Jewish community somewhere in the world so they can be exposed and understand that as officers in the IDF, they might actually have a responsibility that is bigger than just what they seem to believe here in the state of Israel. Have a listen. Hi, Shlomit. It's great to have you on the JPPI podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. And
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. And we're here for a couple of reasons. One is because the AMI organization that you run is now partnering, joining with JPPI. So we'll talk a bit about what that looks like and maybe what the plans are for the National Alliance Strengthening Israelis' Connection to World Jewry, which is a bit of a mouthful to say when it comes to the name of an organization, but we'll put that aside. But I do want to use this opportunity to talk with you about two main issues that I think are on a lot of people's minds, definitely on my mind. And that is obviously the Israel-diaspora relationship, which is always, as we know, going through different trials and difficulty and challenges, but also at the same time looking at how does it look from the diaspora perspective, but also how does it look from the Israeli perspective. So let's first give us the brief intro. What is AMI? What do you guys do? Why do you exist?
Okay, so AMI is, like you said before, it's the National Alliance that strengthens Israel's connection World Jewry. We work with the Israeli. I think this is a different view that most of the organization in this area has. It's 4 years that we are running. It's a joint initiative of the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, and now with JPPI. And we work with the Israelis and how to connect them to understand it. They are part of the Jewish nation. I will say like this. We're working with the big systems in Israel, IDF, Ministry of the Education, מכינות קדם צבאיות,
pre-military
academies, yes, and youth movements. But all the big systems that are dealing with identity, we're trying to expand they're talking about their identity and to להכניס to this conversation the World Jewry. But I don't think it's part of it.
Right. So how do you go about doing that?
So I will say in a few layers. I think first of all, the layers of information. Most of the Israeli doesn't know anything about World Jewry. You can see in polls that 60% from the Israeli knows, if you ask them how many Jews there are all over the world, where they live, and what are their challenges, Israeli doesn't know that. They don't know that 50% of the Jewish nation is not in Israel. So we are working about information, teaching with Ministry of Education. We have now a new course in pre-military academies. That's what they're doing. They're learning about World Jewry. So we have a lot of programs about information. We are doing a lot of meetings. There are a lot of programs here in Israel that people that come for a month or a year from abroad to Israel. Mostly, they don't meet Israelis. They are in their programs, and maybe they see the Israeli in Riba or Burgers Bar, but that's it. They don't know Israeli. So what we're trying to do is to match. We are doing shiduchim between people that are here with Israeli. There's a lot of Masa program for here for a year. There's Pardes, or students that come here to learn in Israel. And what we're trying to do is that each one that come from abroad to Israel will meet Israelis. If it's in volunteers,
but you're doing it not just to help the Jew from abroad to get to know Israel better.
You
want the Israeli to know the Jew from abroad.
Right. So this is our perspective. So we are trying that, because there is thousands of Jews from abroad that we are trying that each one of them will meet Israeli, because we want that Israeli will meet them. And eventually, I think in the end, it's faces to faces, like people to people. When you meet someone.
Yeah. No, please continue. You meet someone.
No, when you meet someone, you can learn about things. But when you meet someone and you understand who he is, and you know his name and where he comes from, I think your opinion, what you believe could change.
But let's go a little deeper for a moment. Why is this at all important? Like, why should Israelis care about Jews outside of Israel? In other words, we're Israelis. We live here. Mm-hmm. We pay taxes. We suffer. We enjoy. Like any citizen of any country has the benefits.
We go to the army.
We go to the army. I mean, it's a very different experience here. Judaism is different. Being Israeli is different. I mean, what do we need these people for? Why should Israelis care about a Jew from, I was looking at your Facebook page, right, at Ami's Facebook page, and I saw you have on February 5th, a post, meet the Jewish community of Cochin, right? India. I mean, why should I care? Personally, I find it very interesting. Don't get me wrong. I'm trying to provoke here. But why should an Israeli care about the Jews of Cochin?
So I think it's a good question, and I think most of the Israelis ask the same question: why we care? We have a lot of problems, and I think the story about relationships between Israelis and World Jewry, a lot of people look at it as how I say this word, like it's a privilege, like. If you have time, it's privilege. If you have time, okay, you can deal with it. But we have a lot of problems. So I will say in a few levels why it's important. I think the first one, we are a Jewish and democracy states. What does it mean we are מדינת ישראל, מדינה יהודית ודמוקרטית? What does it mean that we are a Jewish state? עכשיו, in מגילת העצמאות, it says we are בית לאומי לעם היהודי.
In the Declaration of Independence,
Yes. So I think when they wrote it, they didn't think it's only about Israelis. Israel is the homeland for all Jews all around the world. So I think we should understand what does it mean. We should speak about it. And I think one of the problems that we are not even speak about it. Someone can come to the table and said, I don't care. It's they live there. It doesn't interest me. But most of the time we don't even speak about it. So I have a different answer for it. I will not say I don't care about it, but I think in our essence, like in the beginning of Israel, we are Medina Yehudit, and there is responsibility. There is השלכות.
Consequences.
Yes. For what does it mean? And I want that this conversation will be on the table. Like if we are doing decisions about the Kotel or about Giyur, it doesn't impact only on the Israelis. It has a lot of impact all over the world, the Jewish world. And we need to speak about, we need to understand it. And I think most of the time, we don't even see it. We don't even see that's what's happening here in Israel.
I want to push back on that. I mean, I agree with you, and I think that to be Jewish homeland comes with responsibilities. Like, you can't call yourself the state for the Jewish people and then say, but I'm only for the Jews who live in Israel, right? So I totally agree with that. But I think that the average Israeli today, especially in a post-October 7th reality, would say, hold on, I'm fighting, I have Hamas, I have hostages, I got Hezbollah, I got Iran. I mean, yeah, they have college campus protests. They have swastikas on synagogues. Okay, fine. But it's apples and oranges to some extent, number one. Number two is I get it that they're Jewish people, and there's always that, you travel somewhere in the world, you're in a coffee shop or a bar in Scotland, and you hear, Hebrew, and it warms your heart because you feel like, oh, I'm connected now to a bigger Jewish people. But at the end of the day, the Israeli might say to you, well, Shlomit, if they really care, let them move here.
Yeah, most of the Israelis, that's what they say. But I think we are a mishpacha. I think we are a mishpacha.
We're a family.
Yeah, we're a family. And I think, maybe I have sister, and I don't know her. I know her very well, but we are very different, and our life is very, very different. But she's my mishpacha. She is my family. And I think after October 7, benigun to what you just say, I think after October 7, the Israeli, and I think the World Jewry has much more understanding why this connection is important. I think for me, it's resilience, I will say. This connection between of us, the October 7 showed, I think, the Israeli feel that they are alone. Like something happened very, very bad, like pogrom in Israel, and all the world is against them. And I think World Jewry feel the same thing. They woke up in October 7 and felt alone. If I know that I have 50% of my people all over the world, it makes me much, much stronger. I have much bigger mishpacha. And I think the Israeli, after October 7, understand that the World Jewry fight on them. Like maybe we should say it in the beginning, but if we look about relationship between Israel and diaspora during the years, before October 7, if you invite me to this podcast, we would speak about how the relationships in a bad situation, and United States Jewish, far away from Israel, mitרחקים, and we would speak about the terror that we have between of us. And I think after October 7, we understand that we need this connection because they were with us. When Hamas started a war on us, they stood us first, even before we even ask. They were with us, and I think they showed that we are with them.
What is the, I think I agree with you that they show that they're with us, whether it was through contributions, and donations, and statements, and political support, and rallies, and trips that were made here, and everybody, doing everything they could. And I think it also awakened a Jewish identity for a lot of people around the world as well. Do you see, because I've seen some conflicting data and polling, and you and I were both at a meeting at JPPI, at the Institute the other day, where we saw from data that came out of a Central Bureau of Statistics poll that was done by the Israeli government that seemed to show that for some Israelis, there was a significant increase in concern for the welfare of Jews around the world after October 7th. For other Israelis, interestingly, by the way, according to this poll, for religious Israelis and for Haredi Israelis, so ultra-Orthodox Israelis, actually, after the war, the concern for diaspora Jewry went down for some strange reason, which we don't fully have insight into why that is.
Right.
But we've also seen data that shows the opposite, that for all Israelis, the concern has actually gone up. So I'm just curious, obviously polls always might show different things. It's not always going to be scientific. What's your take on how Israelis view this after October 7th?
So I think after October 7, the Israelis became much more Jewish, and I think the Jewish in the world, world Jewry became much more Israeli. Like I think each part went through the other, not by purpose, but that's what happened. Like you said before, there is a Jewish like a stick for Jewish identity here in Israel. Like people trying to understand what does it mean that they are Jewish, and when what we see in our programs, the Israeli seek for a Jewish identity. They ask themselves those questions. What does it mean that we are a Jewish nation? What does it mean that we are Jewish land? What does it mean for me that I'm Jewish? And I think that the discussion about the World Jewry is part of it, like where we are in those big map. So I think I will say that the poll that the poll about how I will say it, that there is a big increase in Israel about Jewish identity. Why the poll about religious and Haredim, why it looks like this? It's a good question. I don't know exactly. Someone yesterday said about that the religious always feel much more connected to the World Jewry. We know that. And maybe the war like showed, okay, we have more big issues to deal with. I think some of the people understand.
And by the way, religious were definitely carrying a much bigger burden
Yeah.
than the proportion in society when it comes to
Right.
fighting and soldiers, and we know losses as well.
Mm-hmm.
Although it was interesting to me about Haredim in particular, because they do look at Judaism as the religion, and the state is of less significance in their core ideology and belief. So you would have thought that when they see Jews at risk in Australia or Russia or wherever it might be, that would do something to them, but it doesn't. It had the opposite effect, which
it was very surprising.
Yeah.
You know, in one of our program, there was a Haredi that were there, and he said, you know, this discussion about World Jewry is very strange to me. He said, I'm going to the world, like to Jewish community all over the world. I feel like home. I don't feel they are diaspora. And when I come to Tel Aviv, I feel it's something that I don't know. This is the diaspora for me. And
this is the other country. So
yes,
I mean, the question really is, though, to some extent, Shlomit, can we sustain this post-October 7th interconnectivity that has been created? Because one of the things that I've long thought about after October 7th was that with the attack, the physical attack against Israeli Jews in the kibbutzim and at the Nova Festival, and of course the war that has followed, and the losses, there is a physical war that we Israelis are feeling. To some extent, Jews around the world have that physical threat. We've seen bomb threats in Australia. We've seen shots fired at synagogues and schools in Canada. We've seen Jews beaten up on the streets of New York and other places. But for the most part, it's a threat against their identity and religion or belief system, let's say. It's less of a direct physical threat. But what it does do is it shows that when Israel's attacked, Jews are attacked. When Jews are attacked, Israel's attacked. So you do have this connectivity now that exists. And the question is, when this war ends, and who knows when that will happen and how it will happen, and obviously with the hostage situation, who knows how that's going to play out. But do you not see there is an opportunity to leverage this connection to a greater thing than where it is right now?
of course. I feel that there's a big opportunity here, and I don't love to speak about it after, like this phrase after October 7, but I think in our field there's a big opportunity here to connect the World Jewry and the Israelis to each other, because I feel there is, I will say, the hearts are open. There is a phrase like this in English, like people, their hearts much more open to each other. And I think, like you said, people understand that we are connected and we affect each other, that Israel didn't understand it before. And I think this is in our hands. If we will take this moment and we will build programs and education and identity activities because of this opportunity, we will succeed it. And I really hope we could do it, because if not, it will be, I think, fisfus history, like
historical missed opportunity.
Yes, because we can change the map. I think before that we can do it slowly, and I think here there's a big opportunity to do it. We have program that we started after the war. In the beginning of the war, there was, even now, there's like more than like 100, I don't know, more than 100,000 volunteers that came to Israel during the beginning of the war, even when there was still missiles and alarms and all those stuff. They come to volunteer, and we opened a program that take Israeli and just from abroad that came to volunteer, and put them to volunteer together. Mm-hmm. And I think this opportunity, like the Israeli didn't believe, like, why you leave New York, that it's much safer than Israel now, and you come to volunteer. And they said, yes, because this is our home, and we're in this together, and we're going to volunteer together. And I think it's not like, that you do something. They did something together. They built something together. And I think it makes, like, we are in this together, and we can build this relationship and Israel as a Jewish state much stronger, and we can do it together. And I think if we will have more, we will do more opportunities like this. We will advantage more opportunities like this. We can make a big difference in those relationships.
So, talk to me for a moment just about the programs. I know that two of the main programs, our flagship, are these trips that you take senior government officials, society influencers, or talk to me about what those are. And then there's also the trip of IDF officers. Mm-hmm. That is also. So mm-hmm. Who goes on these trips? What's the purpose of them? And what are the results that you see?
So we have two kind of delegation. One of them is for influencer, like you said before. We take influencer in education, in government, in the media. Things like they learn. They have like a short course about World Jewry, and then they go to meet Jewish community all over the world: London, New York, LA, Boston, Washington. They meet them, and after.
Can I just interrupt and tell you? You know how I know that it's sincere and real? Is because when I was, up until 18 months ago, I was the editor of the Jerusalem Post. And when I was the editor of the Jerusalem Post, and you guys were doing all these trips, so I once, I was hearing about these trips, and no one was ever getting invited from the Jerusalem Post. Not that I was looking for a trip, but it's nice as an editor, if you get these trips, you can give it as kind of like a nice, mm-hmm. chupar, as we call it in Hebrew,
yes.
to one of your workers. So I called up the then Director General of the Diaspora Ministry, and I said, how come no one from the Jerusalem Post is getting invited? This isn't fair. We give you coverage. We should have some invited. He said, but you guys don't need to learn about the diaspora. This isn't a trip so people can just have fun. This is real. And we weren't able to send anyone. But right. I totally understood, because it was real. This was about doing something that was genuine and not just throwing around and wasting money for the purpose of giving a journalist who does not need the trip.
You're right.
Look at that.
Yeah, there was very strict criterion who can come or who can't come to this trip, and Jerusalem Post they can't. But so we are doing that, and the second delegation we have, it's a new project that we have, very, very exciting. We are working with IDF majors, Raves Ranim. Mm-hmm. They are like 30 years old, and they are going to like לעלות בדרגה, upgrade their, I don't know.
Promotion, but these are people who are career officers who have signed on.
Yes, they like 10 years in the army. So we take them, but we take 60 soldiers, 60 officers in one delegation. They are going through a course. Like about what before, and then we will take them to a Jewish community. And
where do you take them?
we once before the war we went to London. The last one 2 months ago was to New York, and the war a little bit changed our timeline, but we want to take 7 delegation in a year, and each delegation has 60 officers. So we want that 5 years from now, I think all the majors in the army that has like they're in rank, like I don't know, בדרגה גבוהה בצבא, will going through this course, and
Okay,
they know.
so let me ask you a question here again, and we'll go back to the original question. These are officers in the IDF. Why does an officer in the IDF need to know about Jews in America or Jews in London? He needs to fight here in Israel.
Yes, but the fight is not here. It's not only here. In IDF, the צבא העם היהודי. And when they're going to New York and then they come back, they said, okay, now I understand much better why I'm fighting. It's not only the state of Israel. It's the Jewish land. And I'm fighting for these students in New York, and I'm fighting for this I don't know, person in LA, because he's part of my nation. And when something happened here, something affect him in Los Angeles. And if I understand it, I will be much more soldier. And we can see it every time when they come back. They like, wow, now I understand why this country is important, why it's important that it will be a Jewish state, and who and why I'm fighting for. So I think, Yaakov, it's not something tangible. There's connection between of us. This is the Jewish people. This is the mishpacha. And I'm not sure that I can say Aleph, Bet, Gimel. This is important because it will be, so I can say things like it's much better. AIPAC is doing a lot of things for Israeli state. And if we will be in contact with them, and if they feel that we are listening to them, they will fight for us much better in the Congress. But it's not אהבה שתלויה בדבר only. I think it's
love that's connected to a specific thing, right?
Yeah.
Or that's dependent on something.
Yeah, you're right. It's important because there's a strategic things, and IPAC and the Congress and rallies that they're doing for Israel. And it's important because all the donation, like from the beginning of the war, I guess more than $1 billion, right? Mm-hmm. So it's important, but it's not only that. It's something much more. I think it's something much more strong. It's the connection between of us. It's the Israeli. It's the Jewish peoplehood. So. Okay.
Shlomit Mali, that was really interesting. Thank you so much. Thank you for the work you do. Great to have you now part of us at JPPI. And very, very interesting. And Jewish peoplehood, obviously, I think it's the DNA of being Jewish. That's what connects us to some extent, and it's appreciating that connection and understanding its value. So thank you once again, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode. You can find us, as always, where podcasts can be found, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and of course on YouTube and the Times of Israel